Why does this thing suck so bad? No, not the Switch 2, I mean this. Why do Nintendo's online services suck so much and so consistently? This is a genuine question I have. Nintendo is indisputably the most recognizable name in gaming, so much so that less informed people might refer to all consoles as Nintendo synonymously. They lead the way in left-field hardware innovation, family-friendly software releases, and even actual sales from time to time. From an outsider's perspective, Nintendo should have all the reason to be leaders in online play as well, considering how hard they have always pushed for local multiplayer gaming in their titles. So why aren't they? Good morning, everyone, everywhere. Before I continue bashing the company that I've been a loyal customer of for nearly a decade now, I have to point out that garbage online service is only a very small part of the multitude of issues plaguing modern Nintendo. In fact, it's arguably the least relevant issue plaguing them right now. Overpriced games, accessories and DLC, copyright striking promising fan games while their rivals hire those developers instead, purposely ignoring important questions about their policies, and overall anti-consumer conduct has been tainting their public image for a while now. However, all of those issues are exhibited by other companies too, at some level, and I will talk about them soon. Nintendo has one problem though that hasn't really been replicated by other companies in the same way. One that deserves a video all for itself. That being said, why talk about Nintendo Switch Online now? Well, first, because I had to delay my planned video for this month. But second, because this little thing, the Nintendo Switch 2, is great. Genuinely the best console I've ever owned. But there's one thing even it won't and likely can't fix. The online. It's not a hardware issue, nor is it any other kind of issue that a new console generation can magically mend unless taken care of separately. It's a multi-layered issue, one that includes everything from poor connection to limited social options and more. So let's talk about it. If it's fine with you all, I'll channel my inner naked Jakey for this one. I don't have a yoga ball with me, but this Finding Nemo themed kid-sized lawn chair should do just fine. And yes, I know it's broken, that's not my fault. Someone fell on it at my recent Halloween party. You know who you are. But I don't have any other silly looking chairs, and I was too lazy to rewrite this entire segment, so let's just roll with it. First, I'll admit it, I don't really have much experience with playing on Nintendo's online services before the Switch. But that's no issue, as Nintendo seemingly also has no experience prioritizing their own online services, so we're a perfect match. Nintendo's never really been known for online play. I'll admit that straight out of the gate. Aside from a few strange peripherals, none of their consoles had any kind of actual online functionality until the GameCube, and even then it was extremely situational and limited. The original Xbox was really the first major platform to take online seriously and use it as a main selling point out of the box, which was a great move on their part. Now everyone's following their lead, and Xbox has been left in the dust. Great work, Microsoft! Way back on the DS and Wii, online was still definitely not a priority to Nintendo, but there were a few outliers. Metroid Prime Hunters was a strong initial attempt by Nintendo to test the waters of true competitive online play. It was essentially a launch title for the DS and featured first-person arena shooter gameplay on a handheld that barely supported first-person games to begin with. Truly unique and ahead of its time, as Metroid has always been. But I digress. Hunters used something called a peer-to-peer connection to connect players into lobbies. For the uninitiated, peer-to-peer means two systems communicating directly with each other, cutting out the expensive middleman of running a dedicated server for each game with online functionality. Many people look down upon this feature today, due to its often high failure rate and general unreliability compared to dedicated servers. But back in 2005, holy shit, 2 decades ago? Especially for a new handheld during a time when only about 15% of the world population had any kind of Wi-Fi at all, this wasn't really a deal breaker. Players were more than happy with their experience and don't seem to have had much to complain about. Then, on the Wii, Nintendo released a few big online games, Mario Kart Wii and Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Ignoring the fact that everyone always exclusively ran, and still runs, Funky Kong on the Flame Runner, Mario Kart Wii's online was a generally enjoyable experience. It did have issues, ones that we will get back to, but connection issues don't seem to have been the overwhelming one for the most part. Brawl, however, was a different story. Fighting games, as is probably obvious, require a really good connection to be bearable to play online. Brawl needs this too, even if the game's pacing and combo potential is probably most comparable to trying to get wet sloppy porridge into your mouth with a plastic fork. Not only did playing competitive Brawl feel like doing this, the connection sucked too. Nintendo hadn't been known for online play at all, but this was quite possibly the first time they were known for having bad online specifically. Brawl was notorious for laggy matches and connection errors, to the point that modern Smash players would probably rather pour juice on their Wii before trying to sit through a single game, and that's saying a lot if you know what Ultimates Online is like. Let me tell you a story. I got a Wii Mini as a Christmas gift in 2015. It does not and never had any kind of online connectivity, and the Wii's online service shut down in 2014, over a year before I got the console. I wasn't fully aware about either of these two facts, so when I got a copy of Super Smash Bros. Brawl and eventually tried to play online, I genuinely thought I couldn't play it just because of how notoriously terrible the service was, not because it was literally impossible for me to play it. That's how bad it was, and how famous it was for being bad, even at the time. But to get back on track, I'm telling you all this to make the point that Nintendo's online was bad, or at least flawed, from the beginning. Peer-to-peer connections might work for lower stakes handheld games where you're not playing with that much precision, but it becomes less and less acceptable with increasing levels of competitiveness, and the constantly improving quality of people's home network connections over the years. Nintendo didn't really seem to understand this, as their own infrastructure has stayed behind for years. Judging by the pricing of these different online services, perhaps they saw it as a less relevant afterthought, much like graphics and processing power. If they just focused on what they knew to make, like amazing games and the best local multiplayer on the market, maybe it wouldn't matter. But it did. It did matter. A lot. And exactly during the generation that it had most mattered, Nintendo had decided to de-emphasize online play. Until now, we've been trying to pinpoint why and how Nintendo's online has such a bad connection, and what kind of terrible user experiences it led to in the past. But ironically enough, the more the technology developed, the more Nintendo was left behind, as they refused to upgrade their online experience while everyone else improved theirs. Which brings us to the modern era, the Switch, and more recently, the Switch 2. Throughout the beginning section of this video, I've been dancing around the elephant in the room. It's not just about the constant connection errors or the unacceptable lag hindering Nintendo's online experience right now, it's everything. So many things other platforms take for granted are either entirely missing from Nintendo's online offerings, or are there but in a deeply flawed state. There's almost zero interactivity through the Switch friend list, they're still using friend codes 2 decades later, and it required an update pretty late to the Switch's lifespan to even add the capability to directly invite your friends to play the same game as you. You can't chat with them, there was no party system either on Wii U or Switch 1, and the one we do have on Switch 2 sucks ass. Even something as simple as voice chat, something that has been the norm on PC for literal decades and was relatively easily available way back during the 7th generation of consoles, is still functionally nowhere to be found on the Switch. And no, I'm not counting game chat, because nobody uses that. That revolting splitter setup they tried to introduce alongside Splatoon 2 also doesn't count. Have you seen anyone ever use this? Matter of fact, I've literally never even seen them sell this splitter anywhere. Was it even real? Can you actually prove this splitter was for sale and was in fact used by a human person? I sincerely don't think you can. It required your phone to use it. At that point you might as well just use this. Okay, alright, I have to calm down a bit. We haven't even gotten to the worst part yet. I've got to save some of my energy for later. But as you hopefully understand by now, it's bad out here in the trenches. As I alluded to just a second ago, there do exist way better ways to talk with your friends while gaming. In Nintendo's, I guess, defense, I should probably point out that no one I know really used PlayStation's or Xbox's built-in chat systems either. But you want to know why? Because those systems adopted Discord as part of their platform's ecosystem. They realized another company does something better, and worked together to create a better product for their user base. Instead of Discord or any other more prototypical form of chat integration on their consoles, Nintendo briefly experimented with something called Miiverse, a social media platform based on specific game communities that you could access on the Wii U, which interacted with select games. It was essentially Twitter, except the users didn't just act like 12-year-olds, but actually were 12 too. Although perhaps lacking in some of the options the competition had, Miiverse was generally loved by the Nintendo fans who grew accustomed to using it, and were sad when it was strangely absent from the Switch's release, so much so that many spiritual successors have cropped up trying to follow in its footsteps. Nintendo's always had this weird culture of insularity to their whole process. It isn't necessarily just Japanese company tradition either, since Sony is one too, and doesn't necessarily have these same hang-ups. First they saw online as an unnecessary gimmick, and when they did try to do something, they tried to keep up the trademark Nintendo-y left-field creativity and uniqueness with online too. But you don't have to do everything like that. All collaborative efforts work best when they are, in fact, collaborative, and whether Nintendo wants to admit it or not, they're not the only relevant player in the gaming industry. They might not be part of the console wars anymore, not in a traditional sense, but it'll still always be mostly the same video game enjoying audience, making a decision at the store about which one of these little consoles to pick, and quality of online experiences matter when making that decision. So, what should Nintendo do? I'd like to highlight some good and bad experiences I've had with Nintendo Switch Online, just to show how this dumb company sometimes truly gets it, even if only sometimes. Because while I feel like I've made a sufficient case here for them to follow in others' footsteps even if they didn't want to, Nintendo themselves have already often done many things right, only to backtrack later. It's curious because the company loves making risky hardware decisions, but that never really carries through to their implementations of online functionality. The Splatoon series is a good microcosm for virtually all of Nintendo's online issues, and one where they've actually steadily gotten better. The first two games, especially Splatoon 1, placed a lot of emphasis on this kind of charming but ultimately stupid schedule system, where you could only play maps or modes during specific time slots. A Splatoon 2 side mode, Salmon Run, essentially an equivalent to Call of Duty's Zombies or Horde mode, used to be playable only every other day, which is patently idiotic. Nintendo did this to try and emulate the Inkling's actual day cycles and job shifts, but you can't do that with something that is globally and constantly available. A game like Stardew Valley makes much more sense to pair with an in-game calendar, because you're playing it at your own pace. Imagine if you could only go mining every real-world Tuesday. That'd be stupid, right? Thankfully, they somewhat fixed this in Splatoon 3. My favorite mode, Salmon Run, is available at all times, so I can carry and scream at my teammates until we inevitably lose, but around the clock now! They even added rudimentary party systems and an actual waiting lobby that you can use to warm up, train your aim, and even see other players. Connection errors are also less common, and the game doesn't penalize you anymore if one of your team's players disconnects early on into the game. It's honestly kind of insane it took 6 years and 3 games to get here, but better late than never, I guess. However, they still have no direct chat system, and with the absence of the aforementioned Miiverse on Switch, the cool artwork people post in game have way less interactivity to them. The game also still runs on a peer-to-peer connection, although the online netcode connection has markedly improved from the previous entry. In short, while Splatoon is on an upwards trajectory, they'll still have to make a lot of changes to have Splatoon even approach its contemporaries in the online shooter genre. Then how about the best-selling game on the Switch, and arguably Nintendo's current singular flagship franchise Mario Kart? Surely you'd make their online the best possible, to hawk both the new console you're releasing and the online service you want to sell for $20 a year, right? To be completely fair, Mario Kart 8's online was, and still is, pretty decent, at least for Nintendo standards. This is admittedly very anecdotal, but I've never really had any significant issues with the connection that I could blame on the game, which is doubly impressive considering the 12 players in lobbies that all have to connect between each other. Sure, you'll get lag trailed by shells every now and then, but it could be worse. It's also extremely quick and easy to find and join lobbies, even if, once again, there is no real way to talk between players. Mario Kart World, on the other hand, is... I don't own a copy and haven't played the game online, but I have tried the base game with friends and that part's great. I feel comfortable saying that World is a very good Mario Kart game, but it's online... I'd say it's still up to debate. Perhaps a slight negative slant? Hard to say. But then, there's the online mode in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. The entire reason I wanted to make this video, actually. You could say it was my muse. Is a hate muse a thing? Probably not, but now it is. Before I get into this, I have to preface my rant by saying that Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is my second most played game ever, only behind Minecraft, and one of my favorites of all time. It's the best Smash game at almost every aspect too, is verifiably one of the greatest achievements in video game history, and its sales figures reflect these compliments appropriately. But at the same time, this section of the main menu might as well not exist at all. It's hard to put into words how bad playing online is in Smash Ultimate. Maybe I'll start with the positives. I like the battle arenas, they're mostly a good addition. When preferred rules work, they're a cool system. Shared content is a really cool way to share all of your Smash related creations. You can use the Mii's online now? Apparently that wasn't possible in Smash 4. Okay, let's rip the band-aid off. Holy hell, this game's online is ass! Every single part of this garbage is flawed. When seen as relatives to Smash Ultimate's budget, sales and overall prestige, this might be the worst executed online mode in a long time. Let's go down the list. There is no true ranked or competitive mode. For solo players, the only option is quick play, which turns into Elite Smash when you've played one character for long enough to unlock it. This seems fine until you realize that the previously mentioned preferred rules system means anyone using any rule set is still playing on the same leaderboard to unlock Elite Smash for each character. So you could get a lot of games with the usual 3 stocks, 7 minutes, no items, so on, but players are also free to invent cosmic abominations like this. And winning these games will net them equal points of global Smash power. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Global Smash power, or GSP for short, is a whole nother can of worms I don't really have time to get into right now. But suffice it to say, this incredibly volatile number really doesn't say much at all about your skill level, yet it's still used to match you with supposedly equally skilled opponents. Okay, so quick play or solo mode sucks. Got it. But how about co-op? Surely anything is more fun with a friend. Only if you consider cooperative suffering fun, because this mode inherits all the issues of regular quick play, but tacks on the mandatory rule of team attack always being off. So spamming projectiles or huge hitboxes from one side of the screen ends up being the optimal strat. You also cannot counterpick your opponent's characters in either mode, so your only option after every match is to either rematch or not rematch. No change character and rematch, no proper communication feature or voice chat aside from the incredibly basic D-pad prompts, and you can't even taunt! Someone at Nintendo really thought it was a good idea just to make this part of the controller do jack shit, and we're supposed to think they're masters at game design. Why even do this? Did they really think they would curb some kind of cyberbullying? People still teabag and make taunts of their own to piss off their opponent. Removing taunts does nothing and is so laughably short-sighted that I genuinely assumed it was some kind of mistake at first. But apparently it wasn't. They did make one actual mistake though, which ended up screwing over huge swaths of Ultimate's online player base. The matchmaking regions! Virtually every online game has something called matchmaking regions, portioned out areas of our little pale blue dot where the game will prioritize searching for and matching with your opponent first. Intuitively, this makes all the sense in the world. If you connect to a closer opponent, especially with an online infrastructure that still inexplicably uses peer-to-peer connections, you're way more likely to have a better connection. I do, in fact, live closer to Sweden than, I don't know, New Zealand. However, the problem with Nintendo's implementation of matchmaking regions is that they're way too small in some cases. And this is where some investigative journalism was in order. To my knowledge, there are 0 videos on the internet exploring this aspect of, frankly, one of the most explored video games on the planet right now, which would honestly be pretty exciting if my findings weren't so simultaneously incredibly depressing. Watch the behind the scenes video if you want more insight into my process, I guess. But when it comes to this segment specifically, the thing you need to understand is this. Most competently designed online games matchmaking regions work in an outwards looking system, where it will prioritize your local country or region first, before looking for countries further away. Say if you played Marvel Rivals in Germany, and couldn't quickly fill a lobby with only German or even French and Polish players, then it will look for players in the wider EU area. Makes sense, right? Well, yeah. But Smash Ultimate doesn't do this! From what I could gather, this is the approximate matchmaking region that I play in. Eastern Europe. It stretches from Sweden to Turkey, and to the untrained eye, looks like a pretty good chunk of land, right? But that's only counting land, not people. Eastern Europe is way more sparsely populated than the West, and retailers in many countries in the Northeast specifically started offering Switches only very recently. This means that there are far fewer potential Smash players there, which doubles with the fact that Nintendo just isn't as culturally relevant in Eastern Europe the same way it is in the West or even the US, meaning you might as well disregard most of the countries down here in the matchmaking. And of course the North isn't exactly burdened by overpopulation either, so really the matchmaking region I play in is closer to something like this. Yeah. And we're not alone with this issue, as with other regions like Australia and New Zealand, or this part of Canada with 4 people in it, have similar waiting lines to get into matches. This duct-taped infrastructure has resulted in a number of other issues for people playing in restrictive regions like this, perhaps culminating in what I'm going to tell you next. Let me tell you another story. Hey, sit back down! You're nearly 20 minutes deep into a video about a game company's online infrastructure. You clearly have nothing better to do. And this time, it's not even my story. A friend of mine, let's call him Liero, because that's his name, told me that he was watching a top-level Finnish player on stream one time, and decided he'd want to stream snipe him. He could very easily see that, at the very least, one other person of his skill level was playing Smash Ultimate Online at that very moment, in the same country and city even. In other words, the game should have no trouble connecting them to each other. If it was well made, that is. Well, what ended up happening is that he ultimately had to wait for 5 whole minutes in the waiting room before connecting. And you know what's the best part? He didn't even connect to the streamer! It just ended up being some other random guy. Just as a reminder, 36 million units sold. 36 million. 36 million. 36 million! So to recap, the matchmaking regions are overly restrictive, making playing online either incredibly slow or downright impossible, like in the case of online tourneys that would require at least 8 players connecting simultaneously. Oh! That was uncharacteristically quick! And to top it all off, the connection still doesn't even end up being good. You go through all that waiting, with the lobby music driving you crazy, and the smashing doesn't even end up being enjoyable. There's probably a sexual joke I could make, but I digress once again. This is the reason most serious Smash players have had to resort to using something called the delay mod to make their games at least somewhat bearable to get through, as the regular online play can total to a whopping 12 frames of lag, if not more, in a game where every single one of those frames can be about life or death. Whew. Alright, again, I am not blaming any specific person here. Sakurai is an incredibly dedicated and hard worker, very clearly, and I'm sure every team he's worked with is too. I watched the second direct presentation for Kirby Air Riders just before shooting this video, and he actually kind of addresses how the aforementioned GSP system didn't work that well. And they're switching to a less skill-related system that hopefully should match you with differently skilled players less often. This means that at least some people working for Nintendo care about this. That game, by the way, looks amazing. Easy day one purchase for me. Smash Ultimate was too. But whichever higher up is in charge of implementing and okaying the online in these games has to change. Now. Fire him. Nintendo is a strange company. In a sea of mistreated developers, derivative games, and boring-looking grey sludge, Nintendo stands virtually alone as one of the biggest game companies, somehow avoiding all of these issues. At least for the most part. Their issues are different from your Activisions and EAs, your Ubisofts and your Tencents, but no less important. Online is one of these unique issues, and something that makes them appear way more outdated and backwards as a developer, even while they're championing innovations in other areas of the gaming industry. Even their online system has made some significant strides. The plus side of Nintendo undervaluing online play subsequently means that their subscription model is also the cheapest in the console industry, and honestly offers some pretty great value at this point. What is Nintendo ought to do about this aspect of their ecosystem that is so laughably out of date? Well, the solution probably isn't to try and avoid online play further. We've seen what can happen with that when the first American to leak Sonic's little hedgehog toes tried to make a console with local multiplayer only. Didn't work. His mother is very proud. Trying to lean too hard into online might not be the play either. Nintendo is very well known for their local multiplayer offerings, and trying to change that brand too much might make them lose their identity or even core audience a bit. What I do know is that Smash Ultimate's successor needs better online, and I'm not blowing a 2DS's worth of money on an online experience with no improvements at all. A middle ground is probably the best, but only time will tell if Nintendo can actually find the resources or interest to deliver. Nintendo is, and likely will always continue being, great at what they know to do. Amazing games, easily the best local or party gaming experience, and honestly the only dedicated physical gaming platform that still has a reason to exist. If you want to learn why I think that, stay tuned to the second installment of this two-part episode. But that feature can't fully materialize if they don't start taking online more seriously. If the next Smash Bros is both $80 and has shit online, most people, including myself, would be excused for not buying it for a long while. They could have a big win on their hands with the Switch too, but they could also have the floor crumble under their feet if they get too cocky. Good night, everyone.